Kind of the next part that I wanted to talk to you about in this workshop is really just boiling journaling down to the science. Clearly it works. There's many clinical psychologists and evidence and research that confirms that, journaling helps alleviate anxiety and stress. It helps boost memory, IQ, helps heal trauma. There's so many benefits, but I'm curious from your perspective in both your experience with clients or in your own experiences and the research that you've conducted or learned about from other experts in the field. Why does it work? How does it work? It's like magic sometimes. So tell us the science part of the magic.
Absolutely. So, journaling, it is, I don't know if you've gotten into journaling where you're in a flow state. So, that flow state, there's an integration of so many different parts of our brain. I heard you say memory. So memory is a huge one because we're constantly recalling past events. We're retrieving past thoughts and emotions. So really the hippocampus area gets ignited during that process. And I think it's actually really important to note first that, like many things that work in life, it's all about practice. And when you practice, you're strengthening like a muscle in some ways. So it's really an additive process. On the other side of it taps into both sides of your brain. So you can have the creativity, the reflection. Sometimes people like to actually like doodle in their journal, sketch things out, think of, new outcomes to problems that they have. That really taps into the right brain. New thoughts and ideas about the past or present, or about what's possible in the future. So we're really talking about that creativity, right brain movement. And on in the left brain, which controls for like planning and concentration, journaling can be a very concentrated focus on one task. That's that sort of flow state. And often we're planning what we want in the future. We're, again, reflecting on the past. We're writing down goals. We're being sometimes very logical about what we're journaling. And, I know Silk and Sonder has great exercises in there that tap into that very logical side as well. And it really is just an integration between the mind and the body. You're not just thinking these things, right? You actually have to access many different areas of the brain and actually your physical body in order to get those thoughts into written form. So that integration is one of the reasons why it's so powerful. Yeah. So
that's really interesting. And I think, one of the things that you and I have touched on when we've curated content for Silk and Sonder is around art therapy also being a form of journaling in some ways, right? Like it's
absolutely.
Yeah. That's really interesting. And I guess one question is, how do you know when you're in flow state? Like, what does that feel like in your body? Or is there something in your mind that confirms that, okay, you're in flow state?
Right. It's a real sort of presence that you have. I think we all are very well aware of what it feels like to be in the future with anxiety, or in the past in depression. And it's funny because when you're journaling, maybe you're journaling about some of those things.
Yeah.
But it's that state where you feel like you could write forever. There's a calmness inside of you. You're feeling kind of between the place of challenge, but also like a doable challenge. So, stretching yourself, stretching your creativity, stretching your cognitive skills to a point where you are exercising, but not where a place where it's too sort of emotionally triggering.
Yeah. That's a really good point. And actually some of the questions that I was reviewing from our Sonder fan members have touched on this element of journaling bringing about a lot of emotion and almost being too difficult to process. And it's so interesting because, the mind, and like journaling being this practice or this muscle that gets stronger over time. I really didn't think about it that way, but it totally makes sense. It's like, you don't just go to the gym and lift crazy amounts of weights. Like, you have to slowly build up that practice. And that is really what Silk and Sonder is all about, because you start with 5 minutes a day, and then that practice eventually evolves to 30 minutes a day and maybe an hour a day. And it becomes easier and more fun, especially when you're engaging the proactive side of journaling.
Just to add a bit to the science part,
Yeah.
it can also be, journaling can also be very immunity boosting.
Yeah.
Because when we talk about being in a stressful state, we're talking about fight or flight, we're talking about cortisol, adrenaline, all of these systems in the body's firing, which we know is linked to physical illnesses and, mental health, but physical illnesses like anything from ulcers to cancer.
Yeah.
So really being able to reflect and process and see a way forward, bringing ourselves back into what we call our window of tolerance, that place where we can think and think intentionally, behave intentionally, feel it really embodied, really can actually support the full immune system as well.
Yeah. Yeah, that's incredible. And is there any magic amount of time? Like, when you say it's a practice,
Mhm.
how consistent do beginners need to be to
Mm.
really experience those types of benefits?
Well, in my practice, there are people so we have the range of people just in the world, right? Some
Yeah.
are very, very adept at accessing, their emotions. They're very practiced in reflection. So their journaling cadence might be, twice a day,
Yeah.
versus somebody who may have grown up in a situation or culture or environment where they didn't get the opportunity to practice emotional reflection.
Yeah.
So for those individuals, I would say that even like I get started with my clients once a week sometimes, and then building up, so building up the muscle for that, tracking moods, learning to feel like to even know how you're feeling every day.
Yeah.
So I would say any amount is beneficial. But again, it is a practice where, like, if it's weightlifting, you start to do more, maybe more in depth.
Yep.
So,
It's really interesting. And one thing that I definitely want everyone who's watching this workshop to take away is it's okay if you can't immediately access those emotions or figure out what to journal about. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Kwan, but it sounds like that's not always available for everyone. And you really have to practice to even go there. And that's okay. That doesn't mean it's never available. It's just temporary, right?
absolutely. And I think that there can be some shame around not knowing how one feels. And there's so many circumstances in life where people use repression of emotions as a survival skill. Maybe, kids have to actually be taught to process their emotions, emotional regulation. So, journaling is like sort of that private place where you can get started.
Yeah.
If you feel like, therapy is too intimidating or, there's any shame around it. So absolutely, like we are all on a spectrum when it comes to emotions and our awareness of them.
Yeah. Awesome.